Hey everyone, so this video is going to be about the first level of defense of our immune system. It's going to be part of a three-part video, I guess, that goes through the first, second, and third levels of defense, but this is just to cover the very basic first level of defense. So our learning intention for this video is to understand how that first level is able to inhibit pathogens and to know examples of chemical and physical barriers in both animals and plants. So the first level of defense is our immune system's first way of blocking entry for pathogens into our body. It's also in plants as well. And it's just basically going to inhibit them with the use of chemical and physical barriers. It's considered innate, which we talked about previously, which means it's very generalized. These barriers aren't specific to a certain pathogen. They're going to try and stop as much as they can. So a physical barrier is any barrier which physically inhibits the entry of pathogens. For example, having hair or skin, that's our barrier that will physically stop pathogens from getting into our body. Chemical barriers are a bit different. They inhibit the movement of the pathogen. So things like stomach acid or tears are both examples of chemical barriers that our bodies use to stop pathogens from entering our system. You can see in this diagram, there's a heap of different barriers that we have, and they're just very generalized to try and stop it from getting in the first place. So some examples in animals, we've got skin, which is a really important one. We've got hair, mucousy membrane. So for example, the lining of our throat would be considered a mucous membrane. And you can see on this diagram here, this is actually what looks like on the inside of our throat. These little moving arms called cilia, and they actually will trap pathogens and allergens and dust, etc., and move them back out of the throat. So for example, if you're coughing up something, it's because the cilia has trapped it and is moving it back up through your throat. We've also got something called microflora, which is bacteria that grows all over our skin. And even something like urine. When we urinate, it can actually flush out pathogens from inside of our system as well. Some of the chemical ones that we have in animals would be things like sweat, stomach acid. Our tears are full of enzymes that break down pathogens, as well as, say, the oils that might be over our skin as well. So you can see in this diagram, different parts of our body have different pH levels, and that's a way to try and stop pathogens from being able to grow in that area. So here, this is a kind of a gross picture. If you could see the bacteria that are known as microflora, this is maybe what your skin might look like. And so we are covered from head to toe in these bacteria, and it actually means that the bad bacteria has nowhere to grow itself. So it's almost like these guys have taken over the vacant space, and our body tolerates them because we don't actually get damaged by this microflora. But if they weren't there, that really nasty bacteria that causes infections and diseases might be able to grow in that spot as well. So microflora is really, really important. It covers every single inch of our body, both inside and outside. Some examples in plants, and these are really, really handy to know for the exam. They tend to ask you about plant barriers. So some physical ones, waxy cuticles or leaves, which is just the underside of a leaf. They've got things like thorns or spikes. That might stop, for example, other organisms bringing pathogens to the plant by having thorns and spikes. Apoptosis, which we've learned about, if a plant is infected, actually will just cause apoptosis in that entire part of the cell or that entire part of the plant. So, for example, it might be shedding leaves that cause that are carrying the pathogens. Development of cork, which is sort of like a filling, as well as bark, so that hard exterior outing of plants as well, is a way to stop pathogens from entering. For chemical barriers, plants actually produce antimicrobial chemicals, which stop bacteria from going, as well as antifungal chemicals. They've got things like oils and saps. So you can see here, we've got an oil or a sap growing out the top of the tree. That would be used to sort of trap pathogens and repair cuts. Production of gums, and they also produce these proteins called defensins, which help fight off pathogens as well. So here you can see a chemical barrier. This one on the left is an example of what are called galls, which these are sort of sealed areas that actually trap the pathogen inside. So if these barriers don't work, that's when we start to see some of the cells we're learning about of our immune system work. Now, plants don't have an immune system, so they're relying on these barriers here to try and help them fight off infections. Luckily, in animals, we've got that next level of complexity with our immune system. And so you can see in this diagram, if that barrier is broken, you've got a cut on your skin, or you've maybe got an infection site, those bacteria or viruses or fungal infections are going to try and move into the body. And this is where our second level of defense starts to kick in. You can see here we've got some of those cells that we've talked about in the previous video moving in to try and fight them off. And so basically, once the first level is defeated, our second level then tries to step up and fight it off. And we'll cover that in our next couple of videos as well. So in review, the first layer really just relies on barriers, and they're either physical or chemical, and they're both found in animals and plants. But when that barrier is broken, then we start looking about how does our body then react. And we know for plants, they don't have quite as good system because they don't have that immune system like we do. So I hope this video helped. Thanks.